Good afternoon, YouTube. We have a Lenovo here, Thinkpad, Ryzen 7, and Radeon graphics. Now, this is probably and most likely the identical laptop to what a friend of mine on Island Survival Alpha has, and she's having some issues. And she's got 16 gigs of RAM in it, Radeon graphics, Ryzen 7 processor, so pretty sure we're on the right track here with the laptop. But regardless of that fact, it's still a Lenovo Thinkpad, and I have another one of these too that is not Ryzen 7 or Radeon graphics, and they're identical in how they come apart. And one of the things I discussed with her was possibly upgrading her RAM. She's definitely having some FPS issues, which definitely can be attributed to the fact not her processor or the amount of RAM she has particularly, but definitely video could be an issue, especially if it's not dedicated video, and that is something that is an unknown. Even on this laptop, I don't know if it's dedicated video RAM or not. I have not looked up the laptop to find any of that out, and I have not had this running with a Windows OS yet. It's a project machine. I got a few of these things kicking around that I've been stripping down for parts and whatnot, but I do have some parts that I can strip from a working laptop to put into this, like the RAM and the drive and Wi-Fi, Bluetooth if necessary. Anyways, it does have Ethernet, so that's fine. Anyway, one of the things you're going to find on these Lenovo ThinkPads is, of course, on the back side you've got all your screws, okay? And these screws don't physically come out. They have like a little retainer clip that keeps the screws actually onto the back cover. So once you loosen off the screws, you're going to open up the laptop and stand it on its side, and then you can actually take your thumb along and start getting it apart. If you come across some really stiff issues, it means that the screw didn't come all the way up, which can happen just on normally loosening off the screws. There will be a few that will not completely come up and go click, pop, click, pop, click, pop, which is the retaining ring clicking in, which means the screw is opened. But in this case, a few of them just don't do that, so it's going to be a spot where it's not going to open so easy. So what you want to do is you want to hold pressure and unscrew at the same time. Now, I've already removed this cover so that we can save some video time. So once you've got your cover off, and by the way, if you do break a clip or two, don't worry about it. You got a gazillion screws here holding this thing together anyway. So the important thing is you don't break anything on the motherboard, which the likelihood of that happening is almost zero. Okay, especially if you go in with a spudger tool or a guitar pick, and just don't put it in very deep, and just go around the edges until everything pops, especially on the front edge, and just partially up the sides, and it should just pop off pretty friendly. Okay, now this has an NVMe port in it, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, which is now empty currently. We have 2 RAM slots. Some of these Lenovo's will only have 1 RAM slot. Now this one does run DDR4 RAM, okay? That much I have confirmed. As far as I know, it'll easily go to 3600 megahertz DDR4. It won't be a problem. Just don't intermix RAM speeds, whatever you do, because that, even though it will slow down the faster chip, it does cause a lot of Windows issues. Sometimes you cannot even reinstall Windows because of that difference, or you'll get blue screens of death that come up often. That's because of mixed RAM speeds. You should never, ever mix your RAM speeds. Now, going into different sizes of RAM, okay, within the DDR4, because you're not going to put anything else in these slots. They're special cut. Okay, like I've got some DDR5 RAM here, for example, and some DDR3. Now, this is DDR5, this stuff, and when you go to line it up with the narrow edge to the wide edge, well, you're going to notice, well, it's not going to go. It's DDR5, okay? DDR3 RAM is going to be the same idea. The slot will not line up with the key, okay? It doesn't matter which way you flip it. It's not going to happen. So you got to get the proper stuff. This is called, when it's DDR3, it's going to be PC3L or PC3. All right, the DDR5 is usually tagged as PC5, okay? And then it'll have a dash and then some numbers, which in this case is 5600, which means it's 5600 megahertz. Okay, whereas this stuff here, this is going to be listed as 12800S, which is about 1600 megahertz, if I remember correctly. Anyways, make sure that your RAM speeds are the same. So once you get the laptop apart, pull out one of the sticks, find out if it's PC 3, 4, or 5. Okay, that's first key. Second is check the speed. Now, going to a faster RAM speed doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get an improvement in performance. Okay, it can give you an improvement, yes, but it's a very minor one. Your biggest improvement is the amount of RAM. Now, Windows 11 chews about 10 and a half gigs of RAM just to itself. Yes, I know it only needs 4 gigs to install. The point is, it takes 10, okay? And so what it can't find in your computer, it's going to use your SSD drive for the rest, or your NVMe drive for the rest of that RAM. So you're already in virtual swap. Okay, now the other problem I found she had was she was running Chrome with one tab open at the same time playing her game. She's only got 16 gigs of RAM. The program wants enough RAM as it is. And if she's not running dedicated graphics, it's going to be using RAM. Well, if it doesn't have enough RAM for the graphics side, okay, because it's not dedicated RAM, well, that's also going to slow you down to, you know, she's running about 40, 50 frames per second, which it is playable, but definitely not on ultra graphics. Now, you can play ultra with 16 gigs of RAM with a actual dedicated video card. Okay, so this may not be dedicated video, even though it's Radeon graphics, it's not dedicated, it could be all shared. That's another probability. And this is what we're going to actually find out once I start monkeying with this thing to find out if this is dedicated video or if it's not. But 16 gigs of RAM with dedicated video of at least 4 gigabytes, okay, of video RAM that is dedicated. Processor really makes no difference other than you do have to have an i5 for the game, and you know, you could have like a 2.4 gigahertz, which would be ideal. Okay, 2.4 gigahertz quad core with 4 gigs or 6 gigs of video, 16 gigs of RAM. You are definitely going to go ultra graphics, and you should be getting 80 to 100 frames per second. You know, because I've tested a lot of laptops, I've gone through a lot of computers over the last couple of years, you know, and so different configurations and so forth. RAM is always a big thing, though. RAM is a big difference. It needs to be there. I don't recommend for even a mid-level gaming machine, generally nothing less than 32 gigs, preferably 64 gigs of just RAM. Dedicated graphics card is definitely a must. Okay, 4, 6, 8 gigs of graphics, great for mid-level gaming. All right, the high-level games, well, you're going to need a lot more crap under the hood. Okay, so as far as your drive goes, whether it's an Express 3 or an Express 4, it does not make that difference. Okay, like you can run the same performance levels off of a SATA SSD that is running 500 megabytes per second. It is not going to be that much of an improvement going to NVMe. I've also done these experiments and found that to be true. Faster SSD or NVMe drives are more for if you're video editing. That's what you need those drives for. But for gaming, no. It is kind of, it's a good and bad thing. I mean, it's going to take advantage to a certain point. Yes, it can help a bit more, but it's not that big of an increase. Okay? Your major part of gaming are 2 main factors. Your dedicated video has to be there, and you need a minimum of a quad-core processor at 2.4 gigahertz. All right, minimum, okay, for mid-level gaming, okay? Your RAM, it should be at least, I would say, around 32 gig minimum. Although it can do it on 16 gig with a lot of games, yes, you are in virtual territory at all times, right? Now, an SSD SATA will not keep up as well as an Express 3 or Express 4 drive would. Express 3 caps out at 3,500 megabytes per second. Express 4 caps out at 7,000 megabytes per second. So speed edges do help, yes, to a certain point, but it's the major 2 key components here. Okay, those are the majors you need. All right, so anything after that are little extra incremental bonuses. All right, now if you're running on Wi-Fi, you need a fast Wi-Fi connection, obviously, to help with that FPS. If you're running on Ethernet, same deal. You need fast Ethernet. So if you have an older router that is only like, say, like a 300N, well, it's not a very good router for gaming. Okay, you need gigabit connection. Like, these are gigabit ports. You're not gonna. I'm not saying you need a gigabit Ethernet capability as far as your service you pay for, but you need gigabit to go to gigabit. Okay, and then you get the most top performance out of your connection. Like, for example, we get just over 300 megabits per second on our download on average with Starlink. That is more than overkill for gaming. Okay, more than enough. All right. Even when it dumps down because of ping and jitters, and it dumps down to even 70 or 80, 60, we're still getting extremely good FPS on our gaming. All right, because we got the computer for that job. But we have a gigabit router connecting to a gigabit port. Even though the signal is not 1 gigabit, doesn't matter. But even if it was a gigabit service you paid for, you've got a gigabit router, you've got a gigabit port attached, you've got the correct Cat 6 or 6E cabling, direct connection that way, or your Wi-Fi 6E, and you've got Wi-Fi 6E, whatever. That doesn't matter as much as you need the dedicated video. You definitely have to have RAM in your computer to avoid swap, which does slow your performance down quite a bit in low RAM, because games, when a game says it wants 16 gigs of RAM, it doesn't want a computer with 16 gigs of RAM in it. It wants 16 gigs of RAM to itself. It doesn't care. Okay, that's what it wants. When it says it wants a minimum of 4 gigs of video or a minimum of 8 gigs of dedicated video, that's what it's looking for. Separate video card with that much video, minimum, okay? And then you got the recommended, and recommended is usually based off of 1080p medium graphics for games. And then you have, going into the ultra side, then you need even more RAM and even more video power. I know, I play a game called Decimated, okay? And it's a massive freaking hog, okay? For RAM, for video, for even processing power. And I have it all covered except for the RAM at this point. And of course, I don't have a 16 gig video card, but I can play at least at a very good stable level at 1080p, and I'm getting over 100 frames per second, which is absolutely more than playable. Okay, and I'm getting like 170, 180 frames per second on Island Survival Alpha with my current system. So anyways, but this is how you do these things. Okay, it's not that difficult to take them apart. Like I said, if you break a clip or two, who gives a crap? You got a lot of screws here to put back on. When you push this back on, make sure you clip it down all the way, open up the laptop, go around the edges, click it all back together. Now, I'm not putting this all the way back together here on video, but the idea here is, once you get the thing basically seated, you squash all the way around, blah, 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 and then you'll put your hand and you'll put pressure here and across and over here. Just push down on it. You don't have to go, okay, just push down gently. Okay, don't be too gentle, but don't be too harsh on it. And then screw all these screws down, and you're back up and running in no time. Okay, it takes about, I don't know, give or take, about 20 minutes to upgrade your RAM. Okay, not a big deal, right? Anyways, but yeah, that's the Lenovo Thinkpad. Like I said, this is the one with the Ryzen 7 processor, and it's got the Radeon graphics in it. I will find out if this is dedicated video or not, because I do have to let her know, especially if they are the same models. There's a great possibility we both have the identical laptop, which means it either has dedicated video or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that means she's going to need to at least jam 32 gigs of RAM into this thing. It will accept up to 64 gigs. You know, that won't be an issue, and 64 would be even better, especially when you're not working with dedicated video, because you need all the RAM you can get so that it keeps you away from that swap area, which, by the way, can wreck your drive, which can cause game glitches, which are things that are happening. So it may be possible that that's what we're looking at. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and see ya.